what got me into Kimbaku? Rope bondage, rope bondage, rope bondage. Well, so what got me into Kimbaku? Well, roughly about 3 or 4 years ago, I was briefly introduced into the local BDSM scene, and of course, rope bondage is a big hit in that sort of community. So I had a lot of people that knew I had a tendency towards intricate practices and, well, general interest for that matter. And so they kept bugging me, Luke, why don't you get into rope bondage? And I was actually critical of it at the time. I'm like, well, it's, being kinky stuff, isn't there easier ways to get what you're after? And yeah, I just didn't get it at all. But being a researcher of classical Japanese martial arts, I ended up being commissioned at one point to translate a small document on rope wresting techniques, and evidently it's left an imprint. That's still how I bundle my rope. And yeah, at that point I translated it, and I was looking at the diagrams, and I started to realize that, it was intriguing. It kind of made some sense to me, so I delved into that a little bit. My wife at the time loved it. And yeah, but I never really took it really seriously. I started taking the martial arts side of it more seriously, Hojujutsu, and I actually took on the task of translating one of the largest documents on the subject, Fujita Seiko's Zukai Hojujutsu. And I'm actually still working on it because life tends to get in the way. Be nice to get some proper funding for that someday. But yeah, so in any case, that was my bigger introduction. For me, for a long time, it was a matter of the martial arts, the classical martial arts. And so I approached it from that side of things, and I drew a lot of my inspiration from that particular publication. Now, however, when one thing went to another, Kimbaku and Shibari and Japanese rope bondage ended up being there for me during some very hard times. And yeah, I ended up having some events in my life that drove me to a really deep depression. And I ended up turning to rope bondage as a sort of artistic therapy to cope with that. That's about a year ago to this day. So 2 years into playing with it, I started to take it really seriously. I decided I had ambitions in it. I wanted to get good with it. And though I can't say I'm very good, I'm certainly passionate now. It's become my primary artistic expression. So that's it. And for the past year, I've been doing it professionally. I've been teaching classes. I've been teaching classes. I've been performing on stage, workshops, demos, the whole 9 yards. Last October, I even got to travel, which was kind of cool doing it. So yeah, that's pretty much my history in Japanese rope bondage. Style of time. Oh, well, that's changed drastically. I'm someone that doesn't like to miss out on anything. So when it comes to a practice like Shibari or Kimbaku, where there's many, many different branches of practice, I end up trying every one I come across, unless it really puts me off, which hasn't happened yet. And yeah, so for me to say that I have a particular style, it's certainly the case, but when it comes to what I prefer to practice, it quite often depends on what the model is interested in. If my model is interested in something that's just there to make them pretty and accentuate their form, I've got my Mizuhiki style, I've got conventional shibari ties. If they're interested in something more sadistic, I can certainly do that, and I've got my inspirations for that. If it's something more sexual, which I'm not a big fan of practicing, then well, that's what that does. So accordingly, I can pretty much demonstrate or practice anything under the sun. When it comes to preference, that's largely dependent on mood. I'm someone that prefers connection an awful lot, so sensual tying is big for me. But at the same time, I also really enjoy um, like performance tying. So tying in a quick way or tying in a way that sort of shows off what you can do with the human person and the human body. Um, that's the sort of thing that intrigues me and artistic. Other practices. Well, I'm someone who's very holistic in my approach to things. So uh, when it comes to getting into a new field of interest or research, let's say martial arts or medicine, I amalgamate it. It all comes together, and I make it a big point to make sure it all comes together. um, so accordingly, when it came to rope bondage, I already had a huge background in very classical martial arts where it was always holistic systems. I already had a background in massage, bone and muscle alignment, and a strong passion in all of those. So, um, so yeah, there's that. And then I've generally had a passion for Japanese culture my entire life. So when I started getting deeper into the practice of kimbaku, I looked at many other systems and styles of Japanese aesthetic, and and explored everything from flower arranging to tea ceremony. Of course, the classical resting techniques with rope, and those built a lot of connections between rope bondage and other aesthetic systems. Um, so let's see, there's the style Mizuhiki. That's what I named one of my primary, more artistic styles after. That's very asymmetrical and rather chaotic. It's an expression of shizen, of spontaneity and natural imperfection. Um, and Mizuhiki itself is a term borrowed from the Japanese term used for decorative tying of parcels and packages. So the goal there is to accentuate the female form with rope as the medium. And because the nature of that, you can make it very, very sensual, you can make it very expedient and quick. And it's very interesting to watch at a high speed, and it's very relaxing to practice at a very slow and sensual speed. So there's Mizuhiki, there's Shingyoso, which is uh, a, a formality system drawn from Chinese calligraphy, where it's basically like three tiers of grades in quality of writing. One's not better than the other, but they're different flavors. So you have of Shingyoso, you've got Shin, which is like perfect calligraphy. It would be like almost like printed calligraphy or printed characters. So if we were to compare it to a newspaper, that would be like newsprint. Gyo, which is like a sort of middle ground. It's like handwriting. If you were to scribble on a piece of paper a note, that's gyo. That's the journey, the middle ground. And then so is what we call a grass script. That's like the hyper calligraphic sort of thing where you could compare it to cursive writing, but it'd be like high speed abstract cursive writing. In rope bondage, we have the formal ties. We've got like the diamond tie, the hishishibari. We've got the conventional takete kote shibari or gote shibari. I've got a conventional futomomo, the thigh tie, but then there's also doing it in more of an abstract way. You might have a conventional two-rope box tie, and it just covers upper breast, lower breast, around the triceps, that sort of thing. Ties off in the back. It's all very formal. But then you might have gyo, the middle ground, where it'll also incorporate something that splits the breasts, accentuates them accordingly, gives you grounds to do other things with clothing that might be worn as well. It might incorporate wraps going over the forearms and not just the wrists. It might be tied to something else, sort of predicament bondage. And then we've got so. So is like what you see in early grades of shibari, old prints, like I can't remember the names of any of the titles right now, but like the old magazines you find in Japan there, and the ties weren't yet formalized, or at least if they were, they weren't commonly shown off. and the wraps would just be sporadic and all over the bloody place. So that would be like advanced cursive writing in rope bondage. Shingyoso. Another one I've been dealing with a lot lately is drawn from Ikebana. It's called Tenchijin. Now, I mean, it's not, I drew it from Ikebana. It's found in a lot of other systems. It's also a classical Chinese reference to celestial bodies and a certain form of religion regarding the mandate of heaven in classical China. But Tenchijin is basically like flower arranging. You've got the 3 flowers, the main stem, the heaven stem in the background. Slightly off to the side, in the front of it would be the man stem. It's not as low as heaven, but there. And then in front of all those is the earth stem. So you end up having a model tied up and formed in that particular pattern because it builds a 3-dimensional composition that not only incorporates the golden ratio or the Fibonacci sequence, but also creates this sort of 3-dimensional golden ratio. So that's really cool. It's quite easy to see that in some of the most impressive shibari and kimbaku photographs and videos that ends up being composed. Wild Ties is really good at bringing that sort of thing out. I don't know if he does it consciously, but some of his best photos have always fit into the description of that aesthetic composition. So end lecture there, that's some of the stuff that I look at that I borrowed from other systems. Right there, there's Hojujutsu, there's classical medicine, there's flower arranging, Ikebana. Yeah, and I also incorporate Feng Shui and a couple other things based around environmental psychology. So, yeah, draw it wide and draw it deep. Changed over the past few years. Well, I got into rope bondage, shibari, and kimbaku from the martial arts, and because I deal with classical martial arts, which is different from traditional, I should highlight, but that's a different lecture. Because I dealt with classical martial arts, and I dealt with lineages and how information was transmitted from master to pupil, and in many cases, pupils had to study from afar because they weren't always accepted by masters. Much the same with my approach. I approached shibari from that angle and treated it as such because there's this common notion that shibari came from hojujutsu. Well, studies and investigation have shown that it's not so black and white like that. Borrowed from, yes, absolutely. You can't even rebuttal that at all. But to say one grew into the other, or one came from the other, too simplistic. So what ended up happening there was I was approaching it like that. I approached shibari and kimbaku with like an almost medieval respect for it, just like it was one of my martial arts. And it was very stern, very strict. I was like, people in the past have lived, survived, and died because of what we have today. I've since come to understand better that rope bondages we have today drew almost primarily from eroticism and in many cases perversion. And that took a long time for that to sit with me because I started off coming from a very noble situation or a noble perspective and found that the art that I came to fall in love with was not so noble. And with that came a lot of judgment, both for myself and for some of my peers and the art itself. And yeah, I had some times where I stopped and I was like, the art is what you make it, but I'm the type of person that wants to learn it all before I progress further. And in order to learn it all, well, it is eroticism. Not always, it's performance, and it tends to be sexy. That's the big thing. My practice, I didn't consider very sexy for a very long time. Anything the models got from it was their thing. For me, it was an expression and extension of my martial arts. Since then, I've started to incorporate it more into everything else. Shibari has finally become a part of my life where it's fully integrated. for example, I wouldn't be able to date someone I can't tie. It's a part of who I am now. And though I think that's really cool, it did bring up some internal conflicts with me. So accordingly, to return to the question, because I'm Mr. Tangent, it grew from a stern discipline in classical martial arts, in my mind, and it expanded to incorporate a more human approach. I think that's really important in how it's expressed nowadays, or nowadays in my art. That being said, like I mentioned before, I practice many different styles of shibari. Sometimes it's performance, sometimes it's clinical and dry, and it's an expression of engineering, while other times it's something very profoundly human. And as sexual beings, that is a thing. But that being said, my priority in that has always been a matter of my partner. What they're there for is what I'm there for. And never to impose my own interests into that because, well, in this culture of consent issues, you go and you impose your personal interests over your work partner, your business partners, or your models, no matter how intimate you might be with them. That's a very good way to run out of models. Other riggers. Well, because I'm not someone that studies under anyone, and I'm very open to that, but money, yeah, and none of them live nearby. So, money and travel, the same excuse as every noob that's having trouble getting into the scene, only I took it into my own hands, and with years and years of understanding both the mind and body of people, and both on a topographical and a deeply intimate way, I was given a groundwork to be able to do this sort of thing safely and effectively, built my own curriculum and grew from there. And yeah, so that's kind of how that sort of thing went. However, when it comes to other people, I do spend a lot of time studying other riggers and seeing how they do things. When I see something I like, I try and reproduce it, usually in my next set, if that sort of relationship allows for that. But to narrow it down, the person that single-handedly got me deep into rope bondage was Osada Steve. He wrote an article a few years ago on what's called Mugunawa, a sort of rope bondage that's imbued with the Buddhist concept of selflessness. Not so much that I achieved a sense of selflessness, not yet, but it inspired, it showed me that there was a depth to rope bondage that is mandatory for anything I get into. And because of that very article, I was touched and addicted immediately. So Osada Steve, I like some of his aesthetics in the photographs that I've seen of him. I've seen very little video footage, but you know, in Japan it is still pretty underground. So he was a big influencer. I really appreciate his curriculum. The concepts that are in his system of rope bondage I've borrowed from heavily in my own practice, even in some cases written fairly extensively on. There's also Wild Ties and Red Sabbath. Their content is incredible. I really love how Japanese their approach is. And yeah, I haven't even touched on the Japanese people that inspire me yet, but yeah, Red Sabbath and Wild Ties, I really love their compositions and their performances. Their expression of Semenawa, the punishment or torture rope, spot on. Mossifer from Russia, Boris Mossifer. His photography really blows me away and has inspired a couple of my own projects. He's fast, he's effective. I haven't seen him kill anyone. But yeah, his style, generally speaking, I really enjoy and look up to in certain regards. I don't know him from Jesus, but what I see of his work inspires me. So those are some of the folks there. Um, Master K's academic research I like. I delayed a lot of my own research into Hojujutsu, waiting for his book to become, or for a second edition of his book to come out and be affordable. So yeah, he's definitely an influencer there. Um, in regards to the Japanese, oh yeah, and then there's Yukinaga Max. Absolutely love his energy he brings to his tutorial videos. He shaped a lot of my work too. Um, yeah, just love his energy. Lovely person. But then, yeah, the Japanese, there's Yagami Ren, who I just find his work to be just slightly deranged in this very delicious way. Definitely an artist. A little bit deranged, but an artist. Kazami Ranki for, of course, his contributions to the engineering around the Takete Kote chest harness and these sorts of things. Um, yeah, that sort of thing. Of course, a bunch of the Japanese names are slipping my mind. Uh, Akira Naka, of course, because Akira Naka, he's just one of the big names out there, and um, I've borrowed a lot of sort of micro tricks and ties and such out of some of the videos available online of him. Yeah, so those are some of the people that have influenced my work. Right now, Shibari and Kimbaku is my main occupation. Um, I wake up to it, I think of it, I travel for it, I teach it, I perform with it, I connect with people with it. It's it's literally my occupation right now, and it wasn't a tricky one, but or it was certainly a tricky one, but I got into it, and it's really shaped my lifestyle. Most memorable moment to date. That would have to be last October, October 2014, 2015, October 2015. Um, I approached a friend in the city of Quebec to teach a martial arts seminar. I ended up teaching, I was expecting to do like maybe a 2 or 3 hour thing. He wanted me for 7 hours. So I did a 7 hour workshop on Hojujutsu, and that was good. I mean, certainly got enough content for that. So that was neat. It was my longest workshop to date, and it was a lot of fun. I got to meet people I only knew from Facebook, and so I created new bonds and met new people. That was really wonderful. On top of that, I haven't traveled much myself. I've been to Japan once. I've been to the States once. So for me to really be out there, fire myself off on a train to Quebec City, that was pretty cool, and I got to meet a lot of people that certainly left an impact on me. So that was cool, but that wasn't the highlight. See, a week later, I ended up also being commissioned to do a stage performance at the 2015 Halloween burlesque ball for Mondios, and people coming upstairs, and I ended up performing on stage just a single rope style. Well, I did a martial arts choreography thing too, which is what I was originally hired for, but they also wanted to see my rope work, so I did that too, and it was mind blowing. We had so many people there. It's my biggest performance to date. It was on Halloween, which is like my favorite night of the year, in a rave environment, which I truly enjoy, dance clubs and raves, and yeah, I performed on stage in front of this. When I looked up, it was just this wall of faces. People were transfixed at a rave, like, oh my god. Um, and yeah, at one point, the audience was screaming so hard that I was wondering if it was a shooting or something going on. I look up and there's this wall of faces watching. They literally outmatched the music, which was definitely several decibels louder than legal limit. So that was pretty cool. Um, that was my biggest highlight in my career to date. People starting out in rope. Well, obviously, I think it's very, very, very mandatory that people getting interested in rope, and no matter what stage they're at, I think it's absolutely mandatory that they come to my classes. Okay, I'm joking. It'd be nice for them to come to my classes, but yeah, I'm not quite that narcissist. Um, yeah. So for getting into rope bondage, it's there's a lot of things. It's important to it's always important. And it's rare that people come to the scene um, knowing this, but it's definitely very important to know why you're interested in rope bondage. Is it because you think you're going to get laid a lot? I don't recommend that approach. Is it because you think it's really artistic and really cool? Is it because it's something that calls to you? For me, I found out it was a calling because of some hard times I was going through, and that was my artistic outlet. It turned off my brain the way I needed. It allowed me to meet really cool people and really renew my faith in the human race. Um, so your purpose is important, and not to deviate from that either, because in rope bondage, like anything in alternative communities or in the BDSM scene, it's very easy to get distracted from what you want to doing what you think others want, and you start to lose sight of yourself very quickly. So that's the thing. That's really important. Um, Unless you happen to be in a very tight or consistent relationship where you'll be able to practice frequently. This is a practice. It's not an acquired skill, it's a progressive skill. I would recommend either one, making sure you have a partner that you can practice with frequently, or two, having some kind of inanimate object that you can practice drills on. I have a chair here that I cut down into shape, and I practice my box ties and formations on that. My chair doesn't get tired, it doesn't get rope burn, it doesn't incur rashes, it's not allergic to hemp. My chair sits there, and it'll sit there as long as I need it to, and I get to tie it up. So, to have a medium to drill your ties, to make even the most complex box tie second nature, and something you don't really have to think about, then you can start to make it sensual, then you can start to make it sadistic, then you can start to express art with it, then you can start to do what it is you got into rope to do. There's a good chance you didn't get into rope to practice a box tie day in, day out, or to get frustrated that you hurt your partner and you have to get over yourself with that. Because trust me, that's a challenge. One last heap of parting advice I recommend to anyone getting into rope is to understand rope is not a fast thing. You will not acquire rope. It is not an acquired skill. You will be frustrated. Your ego will be challenged. And this is not something that you can just try harder at. It's not something you can force or speed through. It's something that you need to do slowly and patiently. Because if you force it, if you just try too hard, you're going to hurt someone. And like I mentioned earlier, you hurt people, you're going to find that you're going to run out of models and partners to practice with. If your wife is your practice partner, well, you don't want to hurt your wife, not in a undesirable way anyways. So it's important to understand the pace of what practice is, and understand that it's practice. It's not just training, it's not reading some books, it's not going to a class once a week, though I recommend classes, even though I haven't been to any. Don't rush it. Enjoy the process. It sounds cliche, but being cliche doesn't mean it's wrong. Alright. Cheers.